Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It's your host, Danny Haifong. As you can see, I am joined by Alastair Crooke. He's a former UK diplomat and expert on all things Middle East, geopolitical analyst. Alastair, great to be back with you today.
Thank you very much. It's also a pleasure to join you.
Yes. It's great. Everyone hit the like button as we get started, as that will help boost this show. But Alastair, let's get started right away. So yesterday, or over the last 24 hours, was wave number 61 of Operation True Promise 4. According to many reports, at least 100 sites were hit in Tel Aviv. The sensors have been breaking of late in recent days and weeks as this war continues. A major train station was hit. It seems like the escalation against Israel is, according to Iran, is in large part because of the assassination of Ali Larijani, which happened in the last 36 hours, the head of the National Security Council. Now, in the hours before this show, Israel has hit major gas lines in the south of Iran, I believe. And now Iran, as we were talking about before the program, Alastair, is looking to target gas and oil fields all across the Gulf states in the region, Kuwait, Qatar, etc. I'll pull up some of those images, but I want your reaction to where we are in this war now as we are now in the third week, and as the escalations on all sides, especially the U.S.-Israeli side, become very inconsistent and almost haphazard. What's your assessment of the situation?
Well, essentially, despite what has happened to Larijani, who was the head of the, if you like, the security apparatus, the Supreme National Security Council, his loss, will be felt. And also, as often is the case with Israeli assassinations, they often target the most moderate people, and they are replaced by people that are more hardline. We don't know who's going to replace him, but he was a very learned person, a very intellectual, clever man. He was a philosopher, and he will be lost. He was also, to a certain extent, with his connections to the reformists. So he was a centrist more than anything else. And of course, he will, as you know, it's the standard practice, it has been in Iran, to anoint and have prepared your successor and your successor's successor as well. Everyone has to do that these days. Since the beginning of the war, it's mandatory for all the military and for all the political leaders to have a successor who's ready just to step straight into the shoes. And the war itself won't be much changed by it, because the war is led really by Kalibaf, the former mayor, who is a former military officer. He was also Speaker of Parliament. He's a formidable figure and much admired in Iran. And he has been in charge of the side of the immediate response to events on the ground. It doesn't always go to the full Security Council. There is a smaller, more specific, more expert committee of military and technical officials that deal with the war as it unfolds. And Kalibaf has been managing that really since the outset. And indeed, he was the person managing, if you like, the response to the violent protests that took place in January.
And Alastair, what do you make of these reports? I know that you said on conflict forums you're publishing a very important piece that's coming out very soon. And there's also reports, I think, that go along with what you are about to release that talk about how Israel is having not only a lot of difficulties with the missile fire and the fact that they are likely running out of interceptors as we speak, as Iran hits them every single day since February 28th. But now Israel is according to a cable that the State Department has leaked to Washington Post, said that they told their U.S. counterparts they hope for an uprising, even though it lead to a massacre. But that cable said that Iran is not cracking and it's willing to fight till the end, leading to a need to reevaluate the goals of the war. What have you made of this, Alastair? Because over the course of this war, now we are into week 3. It appears while the escalations continue and the strikes continue on Iran, there's a lot of questions about even an intel officer, the number 2, I believe, to Tulsi Gabbard, now leaving. There's a lot of questions about Joe Kent. There's a lot of questions about what exactly, not only is this war for, but is it winnable at all?
Well, those are big questions. But let me first of all say, in these last few days, because we follow the news, particularly the Hebrew channels very carefully, the Hebrew press, what we have seen has been quite a noticeable shift. The vibe is different, very different in these last few days. And people have been saying, well, it's time for Trump to declare victory and to get out. I mean, senior military officials from Israel are saying this, and others are saying the same. And so for these days, it's been very odd. I mean, for us, we've looked at it, and you can see that something has been taking place, but it's not clear what that is. I mean, it's obvious from the whole range of comments that were coming in about 3 or 4 days ago. And recently, as yesterday and the day before, when you look at the Hebrew press, there was no comments about the war. I mean, it was just off the pages. There was commentaries about rivalries between coalition partners in the government and who might be going up and who might be going down, and other ones about legal aspects and the Attorney General and so on. But everyone seemed to be avoiding the big issue, the elephant in the room, the war with Iran. And it wasn't clear why or what was really going on. However, today, it seems we've got some inkling of what's been happening or what is happening, because Yediot Ahronot, which is a Hebrew paper, has an interview with Ronan Bergman. Ronan Bergman is a sort of premier political correspondent. He also writes for the New York Times in the US, but he's renowned and a serious commentator. And he writes in his column today that Netanyahu has given up on the total victory, which you know has been his theme for all this time. He's given up. And Bergman says that Netanyahu is saying that it is clear that, and this is a big change on the part of Netanyahu, Netanyahu is saying, you know, we're not going to achieve the success we hoped for in Iran. We're not going to destroy the state. The state is not going to fall. There's not going to be an overthrow of the state by an opposition. It's not going to happen. And we are going to have to redefine our victory in different ways. And he goes on to say that, you know, we still have these other wars, and Bergman says, well, and, you know, the wars are not going well, whether it's in Gaza with Hamas, or whether it's in Lebanon, or whether it is elsewhere, for example, in Iraq. I mean, all of these are faring badly. So how are we going to redefine victory? And Netanyahu comes up with a strange sort of formula saying, well, you know, Iran was a threat, but it's not existential threat anymore. It's just a threat. And we have other threats. Threats go up, threats go down. And, you know, we have our alliances and our forms, and we are emerging as a global power thanks to these efforts. It really doesn't hold together very convincingly, but this is the story that he's putting out. But at the same time, Katz is announcing that henceforth any Iranian official that they identify or can locate, they will kill. Automatically, it doesn't need authorization. Blanket authorization is given to kill all and any Iranians that they can see and identify. So that's an escalation on that part. The second big escalation that has happened just in this period, today, effectively, was that I don't know who led this, whether it seems as if it was led by Israel, but that the reports indicate that it was with the green light from the US, from Trump, the attack on the gas field South Pars. South Pars is this huge gas field which is shared with Qatar. It's divided between the two. But this provides much of the gas resources for Iran. It is a serious source of energy for Iran in terms of the gas. And so what we've seen in consequence, in addition to it, is that now the IRGC has warned 5 gas and oil facilities throughout the Gulf to be evacuated, that all the staff must leave it immediately. And we've seen overnight a huge escalation in response to the assassination of Ali Larijani, the head of the National Security Council in Tehran. Apparently, he was. They managed to identify him staying overnight in an apartment of his owned by his daughter, I think. And so they're all killed, and all his security detail are killed too. So there has been a massive attack into Israel, and Hezbollah has also been pummeling the center of Israel. Major attack across Israel from Hezbollah. Of course, the censorship in Israel is near total, and as yet, the Israelis, very deliberately, and we have evidence of this, that the Israelis are careful. When you see a film which purports to show some sort of the result of a strike by Iran in Israel, what you generally see is a little bit of debris lying around, or perhaps a damaged car, and we're told, light or no injuries. And we know, because an Israeli journalist has said this, that actually what's happening is it's deliberate. The Israeli official journalists or broadcasting journalists are going, and they deliberately avoid showing any main damage, but just focus on something trivial, a sort of damaged car or some debris on the street, as if they're acting as real journalists, as if they're giving a picture of what's happening. And it's not the picture at all. They're just deliberately filming a sort of minimal sort of effect and publishing that as if that's all that happens. So total, we don't know. And Israel too. It's been sort of rather a magical war from that side, because, every time it was, no injuries claimed, or, one Sri Lankan was injured as a result of this attack. And I think this is the first day that they've actually said that 2 people were killed. Otherwise, this is a war, where there are apparently, according to the Israeli studies, they've not admitted really to any deaths. A few injuries, people are in hospital, but no. It's a bit like America. America's doing the same thing pretty much. how many people are dead or killed. Oh, well, you won't get those from the United States, from Hegseth. He just says, well, 6 people died in that refueling tanker that came down in Iraq. And others, there are injuries, but they're all back in service. They're all they've been rehabilitated into service again. So the idea that no one has been killed or injured in the attacks, across Erbil, where there's been heavy attacks on American bases in Erbil and in Iraq, people apparently have had some psychological effects, but light injuries. So we don't know. We don't know what's been attacked. We do know that there have been serious attacks with some of the advanced weapons. The Khorram Shah weapon was clearly being used towards Israel last night. But what effect these are having, we don't know. But it's really instructive now to learn that Netanyahu is trying to reverse his narrative. Instead of calling for the big war, the war that he persuaded Trump to lead on, this war is now, he says, not going to be pursued because it's, if you like, it's unwinnable. They're not going to achieve their main objectives. They're still going to go after Iran as other adversaries, but it's going to be redefined in a new way. It's going to be redefined as that Israel has these threats, but these threats are not absolute. They are relative. They go up and they go down, and there are other threats, and we have different threats, and we will win in all of them, and that is going to be our victory. But actually destroying Iran and having collapsing the state is no longer possible, likely to be achieved, and therefore is not on the agenda anymore. Big change, and it comes at a time when Trump is escalating.
Yeah. Maybe you can talk about how Trump is escalating here, because as you said, the sensors are just incredible. Israel was obviously preparing for what Iran was going to do and has tried to cover up all of the damage as much as it can, or as you said, highlight that it's targeting so-called civilians rather than making huge damage on Israeli infrastructure. I'll just show here, there have been some getting out. There are power outages across the capital, or at least the capital as the world recognizes it, Tel Aviv. There's also been just massive images of last night of these missiles that Iran has been launching, especially those so-called cluster missiles like Hiroshima 4, which have been used for many days now. And it's not just in the against Israel they've been used. There have been images over Dubai of these munitions, these submunitions being released from this missile in the sky, and many have noted that it's pretty unprecedented that Iran is using these and really evading all of these air defenses. But to your point, Alastair, if you could react to the energy question, because prices, as I was showing as you were talking, they continue to go up. It seems like a big escalation the U.S. is pursuing is the continuation of trying to either seize Iran's, Karg Island, cut it off from its own oil production, supply, and trade. But at the same time, this has massive effects on oil prices, so much so to the point that Qatar reacted to what Israel did. They released a statement reacting to this that I'll pull up, opposing it because they have been affected dramatically by Iran's drone strikes and missile strikes that are going to target their energy infrastructure specifically, although they have been doing it to a degree even up till now. So your reaction to this, how does this play out in the war? Because this is what a lot of the mainstream media is talking about right now, is how this is going to affect the energy question.
Well, in word, it's going to affect it badly. It was, Iran had been careful not to affect not to bomb or strike at the infrastructure, the energy infrastructure until now. Yes, storage tanks and others were attacked, but their focus was much more on ports. And that had a different objective too. It was on ports, but it was about the Hormuz Strait and about changing the geopolitical balance within the region. Ports are important because particularly Bahrain port, which has borne the brunt of this, was a home to the Fifth Fleet, but it was a home to much more. It was a home to a major intelligence gathering center, to radars, to administrative centers, to munitions. A whole intelligence infrastructure was based in Bahrain, and that's been systematically destroyed. And part of this is to reestablish, if you like, Iranian control over the whole of the Hormuz corridor. And this is deliberately to, if you like, flip the whole geopolitical strategy, because this was, the Americans have controlled, the Red Sea and Hormuz through the Fifth Fleet and the Red Sea up until the Houthis started their work on it. But they have controlled that. And the object, and Trump has made this very clear, is to have a dominance over the choke points and the sea corridors, the navigation corridors of the globe. First of all, to squeeze China, to squeeze China's oil inputs. I mean, that was what Venezuela was largely about, because most of Venezuelan oil was heading to China. And it's also about squeezing in the other direction. It's been about squeezing Russian oil. If you like, the seizure of tankers, the attacks on tankers in the Black Sea and in the Baltic. I mean, all of this was quite clearly, the new war was to sort of try and suppress Chinese economic development by limiting its energy supply. And secondly, it was, if you like, to stop Russian exports of oil. So they are now reestablishing and taking, if you like, because, they even attacked ports in Oman. Oman has been friendly to Iran, but because that is part of the network of American attempts to dominate the sea and navigation routes. So that has been an important element. So by and large, they've left the actual infrastructure of energy untouched until today. And that was because Trump agreed or green-lighted, according to the Israelis, an attack on South Pars gas field and South Pars field that serves Iran. So now it's all restraint is off, and Iran feels free to attack all oil installation. Of course, it's going to have a big effect on the economy. Of course, it's going to affect particularly Gulf states. But finally, I mean, the Gulf states have to probably at some point decide where they stand on this war. I mean, until now, they've been firmly in the Washington, if you like, ambit. They have been completely, Americanized and Israeli dependent for technology and for AI and for now increasingly tourism. It has been, but all of that's changed. I mean, the business model of the Gulf is broken. I mean, some people will stay on in Dubai and other places maybe, but there's been a big exodus from Dubai. Not just tourists, but other people who say they're not going back because it's broken. We went there because we thought it was safe, secure, and, plenty of money to be earned there. Now it's not so safe, not so secure, and not so much money going to be around. So the Gulf states have to decide. I mean, they will be dependent on Iran for their revenue from now, not from the United States, but Iran can either green light their vessels to pass through the Straits of Hormuz or not. And furthermore, a state like UAE imports all its food through Hormuz as well. Qatar exports its gas through Hormuz. All of these are going to be subject to the permission being granted by Iran. So this is going to continue to be a vital issue in this period. And the ability of the West to do anything about it is very, 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 very small to being almost non-existent. The reason being, and we've heard from Trump frequently, oh, well, we've sunk their navy. Well, Iran really didn't have a navy in the proper sense of it deliberately because navies are sort of vulnerable now. They don't have battleships and carriers or anything like that. But what they do have is real deterrence because they have, first of all, underwater drones that move very fast, can be directed, and find their own targets. Very rapid. They're like sort of high-speed torpedoes. Very difficult to do anything about those. Then they have unmanned surface drones, effectively like a speedboat packed with these explosives. But that also moves very fast and can be steered so that it can zigzag around. And that, I think you've probably seen videos, has indeed struck an American linked tanker, and it ended up in flames. But that's not the end of it, because then they have small surface vessels, which, like speedboats, but which carry anti-ship missiles too. And then you have, beyond that, Iran has 25 submarines that can fire anti-ship missiles while submerged. So this is their navy. It's not a battleship or a frigate. It is these small, very fast vessels and submarines. And, it's all been thought through. And this is asymmetrical warfare. They didn't need a frigate there or anything like this. This would be pointless. But I wouldn't like to be the frigate or the tanker that tries to get through Hormuz. And they don't even need to use those because actually, from the center point, and they're making sure that people have to move past Keshem Island now, which is the narrowest point. That's 21 kilometers from Iran, which means that the whole of that area is under fire control from back, not from the coastal areas, but further back. Artillery can reach all of that area easily. So that is, I would think it's no surprise that no one has volunteered to escort a tanker through this. The Iranians control this utterly. What they're going to do with 2,500 Marines supposedly arriving in the next week or more, I have no idea. But the coast, Iranian coast of Hormuz is 2,000 kilometers long, which means it would be about 1 American Marine per kilometer over that coastline. Are they going to take that, and how are they going to suppress the artillery, let alone the missiles that are honeycombed into that shore? as I say, the Iranians have been preparing this for a very long time. This is asymmetrical warfare, and it has been thought out. And it seems, and Trump said, oh, we didn't expect this. We didn't think they were going to. I didn't think they would shut Hormuz. Come on. I mean, the Iranians have said that they would, if they were attacked, Hormuz would be shut for the long term. They said that. I kept saying it. I think I probably said it on your program. That's what they would do, and they've done it. And so what can America or Europe do about it? Nothing, except finally they will have to come to terms with Iran. But the terms that Iran will impose on the United States to get the economic crisis resolved are going to be, I think, beyond, if you like, the capacity of the United States to tolerate that degree of retreat and humiliation. It will be a lifting of all sanctions on Iran, a return of all their frozen assets. It will include also the end to all conflicts. It will include the continued enrichment of uranium, their nuclear project. And it would also include, I am almost certain, the demand for Israeli withdrawal from Gaza and an end to what is happening in the West Bank. So that will be, I think, quite hard for Washington to digest. But that's basically what they'd have to contemplate to set this right.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what Iran is putting out there as proposals, demands, whatever one wants to call them. But they are operating, Iran is, with the understanding that they are in fact dictating terms, Alastair. And I wanted to ask you, there was a piece in the Financial Times, and it talks about how, with what you just described, this has essentially imposed a conclusion on the world that the era of U.S. dominance and economic warfare is over, and specifically citing something we've mentioned here on this show many times before, which is that sanctions are obviously just a tool to open up a wider war like we're seeing on Iran, and that Iran has essentially flipped this against the United States and the entire world. Now, I wanted to ask you, a lot of questions, Alastair, have been raised about Iran, given that the U.S. CENTCOM, they're putting out all kinds of data that looks very impressive. It looks like the U.S. is causing all kinds of destruction that could change the outcome of this war. For example, CENTCOM just said that they dropped bunker busters on the coastline and destroyed some of those anti-ship missile systems that you were describing there. No, of course, Iran says differently. But also they've said they've hit tens of thousands of targets. Iran says those are mostly civilian targets. And Iran has not, at least it hasn't been documented yet, for example, the F-35s that have been standoff striking Iran. Iran hasn't been able to hit them. And some have asked in this audience, Alastair, why is it that the U.S. and Israel are able to hit Iran like they have been? And what is the veracity and the validity of U.S.-Israeli claims to this kind of dominance they say they're imposing, despite the fact that you have the Financial Times talking about this very important, maybe the most important part of this war, which is the economic realm being firmly in the hands and the grips of Iran's dictated terms?
That's quite a wide area you've just outlined. But let's start. First of all, what I've tried to get across to people repeatedly. For me, this is sort of deja vu, because I saw so much of this playing out when I was in Lebanon and during the 2006 war in the south, the war of Israel against Hezbollah. At the time. But first of all, the most important point to make is, you can't compare, two things that are completely disalike, apples and oranges. You don't say, which is better, which is, tastier or something. They're different. And Iran has been pursuing, if you like, an asymmetrical war. They've been planning for it and preparing for it for 20 years. They've thought about it deeply. They have established a system of decentralized command so that a decapitation does not stop the system. In fact, by establishing a whole series of commands right across the whole extent of Iran, with commanders with pre-designated targets to pursue in the event of a war or the loss of a command or communications with Tehran. They have given them missiles. They sit on missiles capabilities. They have forces, and they have, the key thing is the initiative to pursue the war according to their instructions, their sealed instructions, as soon as a supreme leader is killed. Only a supreme leader has the authority to change any of those instructions or to change the planning for the war. So when the supreme leader was killed, immediately within an hour, the targets in the Gulf states were being hit very quickly because, as I say, all this is pre-organized, pre-arranged. So, all the claims we hear from America about, that they've, killed the commander, the leaders of the military, it's been, decapitation. They killed a supreme leader who was at home. I mean, it wasn't a great sort of intelligence coup. He was sitting at his desk in his home next to his office, which is part of his office. I've seen the house. It's very identifiable. We all know where it is. It's on the edge of a forest in North Tehran. It's a very simple dwelling, a simple building. And he was there with parts of his family, all of whom were killed. I think it's fairly evident that, in a sense, and the Supreme Leader did say before this, he said, listen, I'm 86, I'm partly crippled. What I have left is my dignity, and that is something you've given to me. And I am ready to sacrifice that for Iran and for its people. And so I think he did deliberately accept martyrdom. I mean, he'd been told to move, and he said, no, other people have not got anywhere to go, so I'm staying put. So he was killed, and it created a firestorm amongst Shia across the region. The Shia are quite a tight community. Yes, there are differences. Some are 7ers, some are 12ers, etc. But it's created, and many of the ayatollahs and marja, the people who are emulated and you go to for advice, have mandated that it is obligatory to defend Iran. And they've mandated and said they will mandate a jihad, mandatory jihad against America and Israel if the attacks on the Marja'iyya, the leadership continue of Shia. So this aspect to it has not succeeded. It's actually created. And one of the things I said to you earlier, there was a sort of change in the atmosphere in Israel, but there's a change in Iran. And what it's done is it's brought the Iranians together like they've never been since 1979 and the revolution. I mean, they are fully behind the state in this war against America. And, every night, it's Ramadan, and every night after the iftar, the evening feast, they go out on the street, and even if a rocket arrives in the crowds or by the crowds, they don't run, they don't move, they just stay there, and they continue to sing and call for retribution against America. So it's really brought people together and given them resilience and steadfastness. Yes, it's hurting. I mean, that's what's happening. As to this other aspect, this is false, and this is exactly what I saw in Lebanon in 2006. You know, the American-Israeli propaganda was, oh, I mean, you know, these, you know, flip-flopped, footed Hezbollah. I mean, what chance have they against the biggest air force in the region and the most sophisticated army of Israel fighting them? Of course, victory, I mean, they will just be obliterated. And of course, what happened was very different. Yes, they did obliterate. They obliterated the residential area of Dahia in Beirut. I went there, I saw it. I mean, these were residential tower blocks they just knocked them down one after the other, trying to create a sort of sense of despair and panic. And then we had all these statistics. Oh, we've done so many raids, we've dropped so many bombs. I mean, we've obliterated Hezbollah. They hadn't. And what happened? It wasn't the war of 3 days that the Israelis said it would take to do this. It was 33 days and then Israel asked for a ceasefire, demanded a ceasefire. And what were they hitting? I went down, I saw the tunnels and everything. I went around the south. I mean, the tunnels, they'd put dummies there and mock-ups of launchers. And, they were striking and what was very obvious to happen. After a week, the Israelis announced their data bank was over. They expended all their munitions on their data bank, and they didn't have anything else. But since the war was going on, what did they do? Well, they started knocking down civilian houses and attacking houses because we had to keep the statistics up. The war, how many bombing raids today, General? How many raids yesterday, General? And so they've got to have something, but they're not targeted. And what we haven't seen in Iran, we haven't seen any sign that they have been able to target the deeply buried, sophisticated missiles. These ones that are dispersed right across, mountainous, forested Iran, size of Western Europe, huge area. And these are buried deeply. There are no missile launchers available there because they are fired from silos 90 meters down. They come straight up through their silo tube and into the atmosphere, to their target. And there's an automatic system at 90 meters that rotates and puts the next missile into place, and then the missile after that. And so there are none of these mobile missile launchers, which do exist. But these are for the sort of more simple ballistic missile types, which are mostly used to sort of deplete air defenses, either in the Gulf or in Israel. And some of these ballistic missiles, actually, most of the ballistic missiles that Israel is using, that Iran is using at this time, they date from 2012, 2013 production batch. I mean, they are old and they are early, and that's what they're using. They've begun to use a few of the newer missiles, but that is mainly being the more sophisticated ones, and we don't know what they are all going to be, are being reserved for the attack on Israel. So the whole thing is a phased process, and we can detect where it is. The first phase was to destroy or sort of bring out and deplete the air defenses of the Gulf states. Secondly, to strike the American bases there, but primarily to destroy the radars, to blind the American defensive system. And we know that's succeeded because the Israelis are complaining bitterly that once they had, 3 to 5 minutes warning of an incoming missile so they could get down to the shelters, now they're lucky to get 1 minute or none. And that's because the radars have gone, and it's an integrated system, so it isn't giving them the warning. It also spells why much of the, if you like, intercept capabilities of the Israelis has deteriorated, because without those radars, and Hezbollah has been actually also destroying some of the radars in the north of Israel, so that nearly all of them are gone. And so the American Air Force is doing this blind. And no, they do not have air dominance. They keep talking about bombing Tehran as if their aircraft are flying anywhere they choose in over Iran, but it's not true. Nearly all of these attacks are standoff attacks from outside Iranian airspace. We saw a big performance about B-1s flying over and bombing, if you like, the coastline of Hormuz. And, you know, the implication is they're free to fly over Iran, there's no problem. It's not true, because we can see from the photographs that they were loading up with JASSM missiles. Now, I'm not a military person, but I know that these essentially are glide missiles. They're not bombs, bunker buster bombs, as they pretend in the press. These are standoff attacks that you drop them outside of the airspace, and then they glide in and hit the target. So what's the state of the war? Well, as I said to you a little time ago, you know, you can't say, I mean, the point about, if you like, the American, you know, visually very obvious attack is how effective it's been. Well, the answer is we don't know totally how effective it's been. You can't, you know, knocking down residential buildings in Tehran is not effective. It's actually counterproductive, probably. So we don't know how effective it is. And the censorship in Israel is absolutely, you know, 5 years imprisonment for photographing a missile from Iran arriving over it, and 5 years for photographing it after the event, the effects of it. So we know very little about what it is. But that's why it was, I think, so important what I said at the outset to this program, that Netanyahu is saying, we're not going to achieve our objectives. We're failing. We're not going to collapse. The state isn't about to collapse. Very far from it. It's not going to collapse. We're not achieving our objectives, and we're going to have to rethink this whole idea of the, you know, the Great War, and try and redefine it in a different way. So, you know, I'm sorry, but that's a long answer to what sounds a simple question: who's winning? I think I would say, in sum, it's America's and Israel's to lose, and Iran has just got to survive it and stand firm and dominate, if you like, in the economic sphere, and also to inflict sufficient punishment on Israel, in its estimation, means that Israel will never again decide, you know, that it's a good idea to launch another war on Iran.
Yeah. No, I think all of that was very important, Alastair, and it was a big question that I asked you, so I think you covered all of the points. And now I'm glad you brought that up to end what you were saying there, Alastair, the economic sphere and dominating it. Well, the data is showing this in many ways. Since February 28th, it is being reported that Iran has actually exported at least 10 million barrels of oil. Some people have told me it's definitely more than that, earning at least 1 billion or more, despite the oil prices soaring and the Strait of Hormuz being closed. And this is kind of the graph showing the price of oil. And what it doesn't mention here, that particular report, is the importance of China. China actually has purchased, I believe, most of Iran's exports at this time. And so I wanted to ask you, given that there are reports about Russian intel helping with targeting, there's been a lot of reports back and forth about China's role, but what have you made of Iran's response economically for itself to this war, and how it relates to this bigger shift that I think some have minimized, which is this large multipolar shift in the world that is led by Russia and China. Some have minimized it, have of course emphasized Israel's role in this war, but it's obvious that the United States has a big goal here of destroying Iran so it can essentially destroy this global shift. But it seems like Iran in this realm has things pretty firmly under control as of right now, and the U.S. is afraid, it seems, to bomb Iran's exports, given what that would do to the oil markets. But your reaction to this and how it fits in with this multipolar shift?
Well, I had started a little earlier saying that the domination of these seaways, these choke points, and these corridors, naval corridors for energy products, was going to change the whole Gulf. The Gulf has got, if it wants to have revenue, if it wants to import food, will have to deal with Iran and accept Iran's domination of this area. It's going to be a big geopolitical change for the Gulf, 180 degrees change for the Gulf. But the bigger picture, which you allude to, is very important too, because it changes a bigger geopolitical map. You said about China. China, 40% of the oil passing through Hormuz has been delivered to China. China is sending its tankers through Hormuz. The Iranians allow their Chinese tankers to pass without incident. However, America keeps talking about, well, they're going to impose sanctions or close it or something. Nonetheless, that 40% of Hormuz exports is actually for China, because it's such a big energy consumer, only about 5% of its total energy consumption. So, even if Hormuz was shut by the Americans taking some action, the Chinese could live with that. It's not existential at all. But meanwhile, what, again, as part of the sort of flipping the geopolitical map, Iran is saying, if you want to pass through the Hormuz today, all you have to do is make it clear that it was bought and paid for with renminbi, with yuan, Chinese yuan. And so that's how Pakistan managed to get its tanker through. India has been allowed to pass tankers through. And Pakistan made a statement and convinced the Iranians that their cargo was transacted in yuan. So this is, again, nudging very firmly a bigger geopolitical shift, if you like, for the whole of Asia and for the world to see that if if in this new era, if you want to do business and you want to do business in energy, well, you have to shift and think about shifting to yuan, renminbi trade, if you want to get a passage of your vessels through. So this is a really important element of the bigger picture of moving, in a different era and different direction for both for China and away from the dollar. So dollar cargoes are not accepted. Dollar payments not accepted. Only yuan payments will get you through Hormuz. So this is an aspect that hasn't had much attention, probably because America is absolutely determined to keep its dollar hegemony for reasons that we can see and understand, but nonetheless are seen by the rest of the world as basically a form of coercion. to extract concessions from those states, either in terms of giving money to the United States or else making investments into the United States in terms of manufacturing industries.
Yeah, no, those are great points. And you know, as we head to the end here, Alistair, I just wanted to ask. We were talking about the Gulf states before, and you were talking about them being firmly in the U.S. camp. It seems that the longer this war goes on, though, that given that there's this shift happening in the world, given that we've seen over the years a lot of hedging, especially with Saudi Arabia, normalizing with Iran, etc., this war is kind of exposed, I think, that a lot of these Gulf states really don't have sovereignty, and they are following U.S. diktats, despite the massive damage that Iran has done to U.S. assets there, and therefore the economies of these Gulf states. What do you make of the future of the region now that, you know, as this thing goes on, it's obviously going to have massive economic impacts on these states? And do you foresee that that could then create a rupture? I'm even thinking, will they try to come together like they supposedly did before the strike started and try to really yank on Trump's coattails and say, hey, can you stop this thing? Can you actually just make a deal so it doesn't lead to our ruination? What do you make of this? Because I'm seeing a very bleak future for the likes of the UAE, even Saudi Arabia, Qatar. I mean, Qatar, I don't even think is pumping gas right now. I mean, it's a really bleak situation. So what's your thoughts on this?
You didn't mention Bahrain, but Bahrain is in the process of a color revolution, an outpost. It's, as you know, 70 to 80% Shia, ruled by a Sunni monarch and a defense force that protects him, which is all Sunni. And there's been huge protests and uprising. I think what is shaking the Gulf is the sort of idea that, you know, that this could ignite, if you like, a different but a new sort of Arab Spring, because of, you know, they feel a lack of legitimacy on the ground, and so they are very concerned about it. But they have been so, I think, thoroughly embedded into the Western, you know, economic AI investment paradigm that it's going to be hard for them to make a transition or to get out of it. And whether, you know, it's quite conceivable that we'll see a very different geography in the future in the Gulf region. Maybe some states will disappear or change. I'm not going to predict how or what, I can't. But I think there's going to be a massive reaction to this. I mean, you know, the whole lifestyle. I remember going to see the head of the Emir of Qatar once, and while we were waiting for the appointment, I was sitting in his chief of staff's office. And, you know, it was bizarre because it was like sort of being on Wall Street. I mean, all the Bloomberg terminals tracking, you know, every movement, you know, red, green, what's going up, where's energy, what stocks are rising. I mean, it was like a hedge fund. And many of them have actually become sort of semi-hedge funds. And is it possible to continue in that sort of mode? I don't know. I think it's quite doubtful. But it's going to, as I say, they have got an existential issue facing them. Where do they stand in this war now? Are they going to stand with the United States as the United States escalates further against Iran? Or will they decide that if they want to continue to trade and earn revenue, that they have to go and talk about a new relationship with Iran? That's for us to wait and see.
And then finally, my last question to you, Alastair, is how, since I believe this is the first time we've talked since the February 28th beginning of this massive kinetic escalation by the U.S. and Israel began. How have you seen this affecting the other major flashpoints in the world? The Ukraines, of course, the build up toward China. How has this war altered these, I guess, if you will, areas of interest for the U.S. empire, and of course, those it drags along with it?
It depends a little bit on how this turns out. But it is already having a really significant effect. I mean, I think, first of all, the sense that, I mean, that the word of the American leadership is not to be believed. That, after 3 deceptions in a row towards Iran, with decapitations, providing for decapitations, and that there were more than that. The lessons are about the dangers to one's own leadership, the dangers of trying to do negotiations with the United States. But more than that is, I think, the effect of this, 2 things, of this language, and also the effect of that now increasingly people, as the new Truth Social comes out overnight, around the world, people are laughing at them increasingly, because sometimes they're quite absurd, and what they say is quite absurd. So I think there's that sense too. But also, I think the thing that is quite striking, I mean, the language is really, I mean, talks about the Iranians as being evil, people who cut the heads off babies and cut women in half, and that they are, people, I mean, this polarization that is implicit in this language suggests that, that you're talking about a sort of such an extreme dichotomy of evil and subhuman people on the one hand, that obliteration becomes really the only outcome. And I think this is a bigger issue, and we didn't touch on it, but this is something that is worrying a great number of Americans. I mean, also about where do we stand in this? I mean, are we in favor of obliterations, or are we not? And is it really, this war, was it really in America's interest, greater interest of Americans? If not, who was behind it? Who controlled it? What was the mechanism? Who's in charge? And what interests were they pursuing? So this is a debate that is opened, and I think is going to come to the forefront. And this is going to have big impact on the elections. It's going to already having an impact. Is Trump going to be able to recover? Are the Republican Party going to be able to recover from this? I think that's quite doubtful that the Republicans can recover. I listened to an American politician who was at the Republican meeting, Doral Club in, I think it's in Florida, one of Trump's golf clubs, and they were having a meeting to discuss where things are going and lead up to the midterms. And he said, listen, I think most of them know that they're going to be drowned. Some may hope to sort of stay afloat till 28, but most of them think they're going to get drowned in the midterms. So I think the unexpected element, perhaps, of this is I think it's going to induce an introspection in the United States about, what is this, if you like, what is this unseen, if you like, a power structure that takes us unerringly to war after war, when it's clearly against our interests, as expressed in the polls and in everything, that we do not want another war in the Middle East. So what is the power structure? And who's behind it? And what is their ultimate interests in this structure? We've had war going from Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya, all of these wars. I mean, was this all in American interest? Is the financial benefits that seem to come out of these wars in the general interests of Americans? I think they're demanding that, we have to try and get to the bottom of this, and we have to discuss it amongst ourselves and decide where we stand.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to close, Alastair. I want to make sure that everybody knows to subscribe and follow Conflicts Forum Substack, which is in the video description below. You can hit the like button too, so more people know about both this conversation that we just had with Alastair, as well as the Conflicts Forum Substack. You can hit and in addition to hitting the like button, there's many places to support the channel too in the video description below, Patreon, Substack, and much more. But Alastair, any final words before we head out of here to the audience?
Not really. No, nothing further. No, from what I said, I mean, many things are going to change, I believe, in this period. It's an inflection point for America as much as it is for the Middle East and for China and Russia. Of course, all sorts of messages. I mean, you can imagine Russians are watching what's happened with Iran in their war as they continue their own war.
Yeah, definitely. Well, sir, we'll have to keep in touch. We're going to leave here together. We'll be in touch, and we will be back again with more updates here on the show. Until next time, I'll be on 1 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. I will announce all of that very soon. Hit the like button before you go, and I will see you all again tomorrow. Bye-bye.